Hi, I'm Kate Elizabeth Russell, the author of My Dark Vanessa. Please subscribe to Books on Toast.
Hi everyone, my name is Anuya. I know it's been a while, but we are going to make it worth the wait because we are here today with the one and only Kate Elizabeth Russell, who has written only our favorite book of the year. You know, it is our favorite book. We have been talking about it non-stop this month and with very good reason. We are so excited to have you here, Kate, the author of this, this, this amazing book. Yay! My Dark Vanessa. Everybody read it if you haven't.
Okay, also before we begin this interview, just a little trigger warning. This conversation may have a lot of terminology and conversation around sexual assault, rape, and grooming, so be warned. We encourage everybody to watch it, but just be aware that this is going to have a lot of it. Kate's book, My Dark Vanessa, was our second Books on Toast Readers Club pick of the month, which is a very unique digital club that curates new books in a genre of your choice each month so that you guys have the best fiction, which we think is the best fiction, to read each month, discuss the book with each other, with us, and of course, have conversations with the author, him or herself. This month, we've got Kate on board, so which meant that some of you got to talk to her who became members of the club. We are going to put all the instructions of how you can be a part of the book club in our description box below. So make sure you go down and read it, right? So with that, let me introduce you guys to the author of the moment, which is Kate Elizabeth Russell. So Kate is an American author. She holds a PhD in creative writing from the University of Kansas and an MFA from Indiana University. My Dark Vanessa is her first novel. She is also a lot of fun on Instagram, where you'll find loads of MTV Easter eggs. And in a recent throwback post, she even confessed to being a cottagecore princess. So,
I had no idea what cottagecore was until this very moment. So thank you very much, Kate, and welcome to Books on Toast. What did you read last that you really loved?
Hmm. I reread a novel in like one sitting, a novel that I loved when I was a kid. It's called Tenderness by Robert Cormier, who was an American YA before YA was a real genre. He wrote other books called The Chocolate War and called I Am the Cheese. But anyway, I remember reading this book Tenderness when I was like 12 years old and reread it about a month ago, and it was like way more disturbing than I remembered it being. But I don't know, I was kind of like in awe of my 12-year-old self of loving this like really dark and disturbing book at that age. And I'm like, I knew what I was into even when I was 12.
Well, yeah, it was sort of like looking back at yourself and realizing, I was always a little bit twisted in the head.
Yeah, exactly.
Aren't we all? Okay, let's talk about My Dark Vanessa, the reason we are all here today. I wanted to tell you personally, it was I read that book for 3 days straight. The last spent the whole third night finishing the book because I could not put it down, and for me it felt like I was constantly at war with myself because what was happening was disturbing me a lot, and I wanted to put the book down, but the way you'd written it and the story and Vanessa's character and what she was going through was so compelling that I couldn't. So I really just wanted to ask you, what was it like as uncomfortable as it was for me to read, it must have been 10 times more uncomfortable for you to write. So did you distance yourself from Vanessa at all, or how did you distance, or did you distance yourself at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. In hindsight, I mean, I want to say no. I don't feel like I distanced myself at all, because I feel like through the writing process, and I worked on this for a really long time, but through the whole writing process, I feel like I tried to embody Vanessa more often than not. That was just sort of what the book required me to do, whether that's because of like choosing to write it in a close first person point of view, or just because I relate to Vanessa so much. But there was, yeah, throughout most of the writing process, I wouldn't have ever described there being much distance between her and I, except that my life, especially during like the last 5 years of the writing process, which happened when I was in a PhD program, my actual like daily life was really different from anything described in the book. I, had a fairly heavy and strict schedule of teaching, taking courses, prepping for exams, and of course writing the book. And I, was with my now husband and had like a very happy, like supportive, comfortable life. And so that, made it easier to sort of go every day into the depths of like writing this really heavy story. But I think of Vanessa as she's real to me, the way that people are real to me. And I think of her as someone that almost like exists out there in the world. And she's someone that I still kind of feel like I have to protect in a certain way. So I feel very much tied to her. And yeah, the boundaries between her character and my own are very porous, I guess you could say.
That's amazing. I mean, also the amount of depth of feeling you put in the character itself was compelling, because I don't think I've underlined a book on Kindle this much in my adult life as much as I did with My Dark Vanessa. There were just haunting paragraphs in it that really made me feel like this is a story I can relate to at its core, even though I have not been through what she went through, but I could fully understand, empathize, and relate, which is a great testament to your writing, because I mean, it's so difficult to do. So I think just at the very bottom of it, why don't you tell us why you chose to tell this story and what drew you to this subject matter?
So yeah, like I said, I started working on this a long time ago. I was about 16 when I started working with the character of Vanessa and the teacher character. And what really drew me to those characters at that age, or this, subject material at that age, was trying to I was always a storyteller. I was always writing fiction from a very like young age. As soon as I could really learn to write, I started writing little stories. And so writing fiction wasn't odd for me to do, even at like age 16. It was something that I've been doing forever. But writing fiction was always a way for me to try to like process my life and my experiences, and turning my life into fiction was the thing that made the most sense to me. And so at 16, what I was sort of becoming very much aware of, and maybe even obsessed with, was trying to figure out the way that the world was suddenly treating me differently and treating my friends differently. And it was that increased sort of sexualization by adults, especially by grown men, that was happening to me, but also just observing it in the wider culture. At that age, I was really kind of obsessed with Britney Spears. So this was like 1998 when she first became popular, and her the sexualization of Britney Spears when she was like 16, 17 years old hinged so much on her teenageness, right? And so being that same age or like a little bit younger and watching that, it was a real sort of like revelation of realizing like, oh, my age, my adolescence, this is something that's like titillating. This is something that's like a fantasy of grown men. And when you're a girl being told that your beauty, your sexualization, like that's where your worth, sort of resides, it gets really complicated if you were a girl like me who was sort of like over analytical and tried to, really unpack any big idea that takes over your brain. Like I was just sort of obsessed with this. And also I read Lolita for the first time when I was 14 and completely
14.
14. And I nobody gave it to me. I like sought out the book on my own, fell in love with it on my own, both as a piece of literature, like I fell in love with the writing, but I also fell in love with the story because it was this story of a grown man sexualizing a young girl presented in a really romanticized way. And so all of this sort of came together in my head, and really it pushed me to working on this creative project that lasted for 18 years, but it also really shaped the way I viewed myself and the way that I viewed the world. And this was how I thought the world worked. And I mean, I wasn't wrong, right? That like girls are sexualized in this way.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a complicated thing because I feel like often when I describe the origin of this story, there's almost this like implicit understanding, like, and I was so wrong, or I didn't know what I was doing, or like I was so misguided. But I don't think I was. I think as a teenager, I was very I was almost like pragmatic about it. I was like, this is what men think about. This is what girls experience. This is, there's no way to avoid this. So why not, put the Lolita filter on it, I guess, and try to make it into a love story rather than something horrific. Not sure if any of that makes sense. It's complicated.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, I think we had a conversation while we were talking about the book just amongst ourselves, right? Like the fact that pop culture for, I think at least we all grew up at around the same age. That was the late 90s, early 2000s. And there was Aerosmith's Crazy, American Beauty, Lolita, of course, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, everything sort of, even Japanese high school uniforms over sexualize the idea of a teenage girl. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, when I read, you've said this in other interviews as well, that you wrote it for girls your age who grew up in the 90s to Britney Spears. That's us. That's
Yeah, all of us.
yeah. I don't know if that's why this book spoke to us so much. Like we related to the Vanessa character hard. Because I feel like we've all experienced this in life where when we were kids, we were the stars of our story, right? We were the heroines and the world revolved around us. And we were all like, so much potential and the future was ours and it was bright and blah, blah, blah. And somewhere down the line, everybody in my generation sort of hit their 30s and we hit this like giant wall of disillusionment. Just like, what happened to all of that? What happened to all the things they told us about who we were and what we were going to be? And now it's just like lost. We're all lost. So, Rory Gilmore in the revival of Gilmore Girls. I don't know if you're a fan, but I'm a huge fan. And the same thing happened to her. And it's like a global phenomenon. So I want to ask you, did you also experience that because you've brought it to life so wonderfully with Vanessa? Or were you like, my book is a hit. I've arrived. I don't need disillusionment. I mean,
Oh my God. No, totally. And I feel that disillusionment in sort of in a much wider sense right now, but in terms of like gender and sexual politics, I think I was like in my mid to late 20s when it really started to hit me. And for me, it was from learning about trauma and learning about PTSD, especially PTSD from prolonged trauma, and how that can affect a person, because I saw so many of the symptoms of that in this character Vanessa that I've been writing. And because Vanessa was so much based on sort of my own sort of emotional experiences, especially, that caused me also learning about trauma to look at myself. And looking back, it was this constant sort of process of re-examining these things that sort of, not like traumatic experience necessarily, but experiences like in the book at the beginning of the school year when Vanessa and her dorm mates are given a rape whistle, right? which is something that I remember happening to me when I was a freshman in college, being given a rape whistle. Like, here's a tool to protect you. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I think something like that is really normalized. But when you look back and you think about the prevalence of sexual violence and how normalized that is, that the act of giving teenage girls a rape whistle as though that's going to protect them, that feels so sinister and depressing, and teaching girls this, like, you're strong, you can do whatever you want, but at the same time there's danger out there and it's going to try to come for you, and the best thing you can do is try to protect yourself, and that's all you can do, and we're not going to help you, but here's a like. And so the disillusionment, I think, came from re-examining moments like that. And I tried to channel that into Vanessa's character, especially her at 32 in those scenes with her therapist. And then the Me Too movement sort of happened as I was writing the book. And that was a whole other process of sort of figuring out how I wanted to address or not address that movement. But that ended up also being something like that I think Vanessa sort of channels those feelings of disillusionment into is her reactions to the Strane's other accusers, but also like the movement as a whole.
Yeah, I think you've done a really good job of using the Me Too movement to tell Vanessa's story. It's a great catalyst for her to sort of, look back and re-examine what happened to her. And the interesting thing about her is that she refuses to see herself as a victim. And for me, it was a very interesting angle, because it made me question how loaded the word victim was, and what I brought to that word myself, and what we all bring when we call someone a victim. So I thought that was a very interesting choice. So I want to talk to you about, victimhood, sexual agency, consent, and what it all means, and what were you trying to say through Vanessa's character about these very, very, very important concepts that we are all learning about so late in our lives. Um,
Yeah, that's a bit, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there,
Sorry.
but
Let's discuss the victim, Vanessa's take on what happened to her. Let's talk there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You're totally right that victim, it's such a loaded term, and it has a real connotation of, I think in Vanessa's eyes, there's a real connotation of weakness in that word. But also there's a scene sort of later in the book when Vanessa's in college and she's remembering something that Strane has told her about victimhood, and that women choose victimhood. And I think that's a really prevalent idea. But the thing is, it's not entirely untrue. But at the same time, like, it's a complicated thing. But when you think about sexual violence, on the one hand, you can think of these acts as being sort of having a core truth to them. Like when Vanessa says, he didn't rape me, like what she's saying is the act happened, but I felt a certain way about it that sort of negated the act of violence, or made this act of violence not so bad, or like I was complicit in it because I felt willing on some hand. And so if you think of an act of sexual violence in that way, does the rape exist if the victim feels conflicted about it? Like, that's a huge question, and I don't think there's an easy answer to that. But I think for Vanessa, the term victimhood encompasses all of those complications, and to accept the label of victim, she would have to reckon with all of those complications, right? She would have to decide for herself, like, was that still rape, even if I felt like I wanted it at the time, even if I changed my mind after it happened. And these are, that's so hard. And it's not like women are given much like guidance or support in trying to figure this stuff out.
No.
And I've been thinking lately a lot about how so much of like the difficulty in trying to grapple with the idea of like changing a victim, changing their mind after an act of sexual violence, uh, like consenting to it, but then later rethinking it and reevaluating it and saying like, no, that was wrong. No, that was an act of violence. So often that gets sort of put in the framework of like, well, then you're accusing someone of a crime. And that is such a loaded thing. Like thinking of Vanessa, I feel like to a certain extent, that would prevent someone like Vanessa from even entering into that space, because as soon as you start to reckon with your own feelings, it gets framed as like this legal thing, this accusation, and then you have to think, well, you're putting someone's reputation on the line, and it so quickly becomes about the abuser. And so it's like, where does this space even exist for women to work through, and not just women, it's not but it's so often gendered, but for victims to work through these complicated feelings and these contradictions. And yeah, for me, the space was fiction, and I think that's why fiction can be so powerful. And for Vanessa, it was a therapist's office where she was able to work through this stuff.
Yeah, I remember reading that line where she said that I have to believe it's a love story. I want to believe that it's a love story. Just she words it so simply in one line that you understand all of it suddenly. My final question to you is, what are you working on next? You did mention that you're writing something. So tell us about
You have to tell us now.
Yes.
The secret.
So working on a couple of projects. One is the book 2 that I'm calling it. My next big fiction project. But I'm so superstitious, I like don't even want to call it a novel, even though obviously that's what it is. But I'm like, it's going well. I feel really excited about it, but yeah, superstitious. I like don't want to like jinx myself, but it I can say it deals with the early mid 2000s. That's sort of my time period that I'm always interested in unpacking. Young women, and a lot I'm thinking about the internet, especially the internet pre-Facebook, when it was, in my mind, like a little bit freer. People weren't using their real names. It was a little bit more conducive to creativity. It wasn't monetized like it is now. It was a space of, I don't know, a lot more freedom. And so those are sort of the ideas that I'm working with that project. And another writing project I can't talk about yet, but it's very exciting, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about it soon.
Woohoo. My next Vanessa. Done. Please thank me in your acknowledgements.
This is the one thing Anuya asks all authors she loves.
Now, I don't love also, I ask. It's fine.
Just try to make her feel special, Anuya.
Yeah. She feels special. Her book is a smash. I hope. How do you feel though right now? How are you feeling with all this, all the love that Vanessa has got? Are you relieved, or are you like done? What is that? What do you feel?
Oh, it's so weird. I mean, it's a constant it's a weird emotional ride, that's been going on since the book sold, which was in almost 2 years ago now. And the whole process of the lead up to publication was just getting like more and more people reading the book and reacting to it. And the response was so just like overwhelming then, of just people like at HarperCollins being so excited about it and having these reactions to Vanessa that was just like, oh my God, people, just the thought of people reading it and like sort of bringing her into their psyches, and it was incredible. And then once the book was released, then having readers have that experience and getting messages and seeing reactions is just incredible. And sometimes it would feel like I would feel almost like alienated from the book in a way, because it was like this thing that was only mine for so long. But then I come back around, then I like revisit it, and I'm like, no, this is still the book that I wrote. Like, it's still mine, but now it's just like belongs to other people, and that can be true too. So it's this like back and forth, but it's a dream. It's incredible, and it's giving me a lot of like creative energy too. that
Wow.
that sounds a little like a little cryptic, but well, yeah, it's all
Well, we'll
useful.
take it. Thank you for sharing your energy with us. I'm so happy that we got to read this book.
Well,
But
thank you.
thank you, Kate, for being so forthcoming in your answers and so generous with your time. And thank you, everybody, for watching this video. Please don't forget to pick up My Dark Vanessa if you haven't read it. A link to the book will be in the description box below. Anuya is holding up the gorgeous cover, which really pulls you in as well. So yeah, if you like this video, please like it, share it with everybody, subscribe to our channel, and yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.